Hundreds of thousands of people flocked to the Capitol on Saturday, not to celebrate President Trump's inauguration, but in protest of it. The Women's March on Washington attracted more than double the amount of people expected, and millions more women across the country and around the globe also marched on Saturday. But now that the weekend is over, what happens next? Joining me now are Michigan organizer for the Women's March, Phoebe Hopps, Indiana organizer Khadijah Shareef, and Democratic strategist Nomiki Konst. Ladies, welcome to you all. Phoebe and Khadijah, I'd like to start with you first. Give me a sense of how you ended up organizing groups from your states to go to Washington. Phoebe?
We saw a real need to have Michigan represented in this march. And sure enough, after I had created the initial Facebook post, we had over 250,000 people hit our site within the first week. So we knew we were onto something.
And Khadijah, what about you?
I joined the Facebook group with the organizers early November and started working there to help get women registered to secure transportation to Washington from Indiana. We ended up with over 5,000 people in our Facebook chat the first few weeks to get organized. That was basically from southern Indiana.
Wow. Let me ask you, Phoebe, so were these demonstrations in protest of Donald Trump?
Actually, they were for the different things we were marching for. We felt a need to march for our rights, to let our voices be heard in Washington, as well as just connecting with community and deciding what we needed best at the moment.
Yeah, what about you, Khadijah? What was your experience? Was this a demonstration in protest of Donald Trump?
No, this was not a protest at all. This was a demonstration of actually showing each other across the country and the world what women could do when we come together and when we organize. So the fact that Mr. Trump is now our president is a byproduct of what was created out of this movement. So the movement definitely was more of a demonstration and of women being able to motivate each other, support each other. And as you can see, we got women and men who support us from around the world out to be able to stand in a very, very united way.
So, Nomi, let me turn to you. We saw the numbers that turned out on Saturday. We see the commitment from people like Phoebe and Khadijah. What happens now for Democrats? How is it that they capitalize on what they saw took place on Saturday?
What took place on Saturday, and I was at the inauguration of President Obama, both inaugurations, and of Donald Trump, and at the Women's March in Washington. And I'll tell you, even compared to the 2009 inauguration, from what I witnessed from my vantage point on top of a dumpster truck, there were more people at this Women's March in solidarity than there even were at Obama's inauguration from my vantage point into the streets. Now, what does that mean? That means that you have a group of citizens who are there in unity on a wide array of issues, whether it's immigrants' rights, reproductive rights, student rights, native rights, indigenous rights. The list is very large, and the intersection of these issues is very clear, and that's what was represented at this march. I think just the act of the march itself put so much pressure. I mean, you saw Donald Trump try to distract the press by talking about how his inauguration was breaking record size. That meant that he was affected by that. The fact that he tried to change the conversation, that's what happens when people go to the streets. They can do it peacefully like they did at the Women's March, where there were no arrests and it was a loving experience, or unfortunately, sometimes it happens in other ways when there are more emotional protests. But people are going to go back to their communities. They're going to organize at a local level. I heard so many different folks talk about running for office, challenging their elected officials, because we know that as Democrats, we don't have a lot of power right now, and it's really going to happen from the ground up, from the local level up, and that's how you challenge things like these reproductive right attacks that are happening at the state level, all the way up to the national level. Whether it's challenging, Betsy DeVos, who's running as education secretary right now. I mean, this is what activism is: meeting in the streets, organizing at the local level. It's just not as traditional now with social media, and it's hard to define. But that's why places like, Occupy Wall Street, people said it wasn't successful. Mitt Romney got in trouble because of his 48% comment. You know, this the 99% was that came from Occupy Wall Street. So this does make a difference, and I'm excited to see what happens.
So Phoebe, let me turn to you then. What is it that you go and do now that this march is over? What are your plans?
We have a tremendous group of people wanting to move on this in Michigan. We basically want to divide by 14 different congressional districts to really hit the ground running, move this momentum into a real force, whether it be by calling our representatives, running for office, inspiring others to run for office, and just day-to-day, even local government, grassroots efforts. This is what we're committed to, and we're going ahead with that.
Khadijah, what about you? And also, we use the term sometimes a lot, movement. Is this a movement, you think?
I absolutely do believe this is a movement, and I believe it's a movement because of the way it became so organic in its growth. In Indiana, we had over 10,000 women that have participated in this march, either nationally and or locally at the different sister marches across the state. We have an extremely diverse group of women that have come together to ensure that, number one, our next first move is to make sure we leave no woman behind, whether she be black, white, Hispanic, whether she be Christian, Muslim, or Jew, whether she be transgender, whether she be someone who's fighting for abortion rights, somebody who's fighting for equal rights, and so forth. We're not leaving any black lives out, no brown lives out, no green, nobody. We want to include everyone. That's our biggest goal, is to make sure every woman knows that they are to be included. Then our goal here in Indiana is to ensure that we deal with our local issues here locally, and that we insert ourselves into our political structure so that we can determine what our representation looks like, and that we ensure that from Indiana, that we send people to Washington, that we send people to Indianapolis, to our state house. They're going to represent the true values of what Hoosiers stand for. So we are really expecting to make sure that we do this on a level that has been unheard of. And these women, these mothers, these wives, these sisters, these warriors, they're ready to go. They're ready to do it. We got a big love army here, and we're ready to start moving.
Nomi, let me ask you, there are reports, we only have about a minute left here, but there are reports that the DNC chair hopefuls didn't necessarily take part. Is that a problem?
There was one DNC chair that's running, Pete Buttigieg, who's from South Bend, Indiana. He actually did a march in his locality, just to make that clear. I think it is a concern. It's not just that they didn't go to the march; it's that they went to a fundraiser meeting with a controversial figure named David Brock. And David Brock has been very close to the Clintons. He has been tied to the large money, and he is very much somebody who is against the Bernie movement, the Bernie faction of the party. He's gone after Bernie himself, Bernie's chair. He went after me. So I do think that this is a significant issue. Now, David Brock says he wants to support progressives, and he wanted to meet with all the DNC chairs to see how he could use that money to help the party. But I think they've all got a lot of work to do and a lot of explaining to do at this point.
All right, Nomiki Konst, Phoebe Hopps, Khadijah Shareef, thank you, ladies, for your time. Appreciate it.